So this is part 12 in the Prepare Us a Table before me, looking at wild harvest edibles. And by virtue of their being edible, they also function in a medicinal standpoint too, just by nature of the fact that that's the way God designed food. So with that in mind, just want to bear in mind that if you're navigating a health challenge that you think something that we talk about tonight might be an educational benefit to your health regimen, that you partner with a healthcare provider that has a similar philosophy of care that you do, and that this is education and can add tools to your toolbox, and just to check things out and do due diligence before applying something in your health status. So our topic of tonight is going to begin with a common plant that's found in our area, the Pacific Northwest, even over on the east side of the state, and that's Oregon grape. Comes in at least two different varieties, Mahonia aquifolium and Mahonia nervosa. Nervosa is the more low-growing form of Oregon grape, as opposed to the aquifolium, which it can be much taller. They can be 6, 8, 10 feet tall, like a huge shrub. But they have similar properties. They both have the berries on them that you see in this picture here. They get reddish leaves in the fall and very nice, tender, pliable, suppliant leaves in the spring. So the things that are edible on it are the berries, the flowers, and the young leaves. The roots are not really a culinary component so much as a medicinal component that is utilized. But the berries, flowers, and young leaves are used as food. The berries are very tart and seedy. So I referred to them when I are sharing them with kids as nature's warheads. A warhead is a very sour candy that makes you pucker right up, but they're very sour. They're kind of like a grape, and yet they have a much more sour component to them. And they're great for jams and jellies, because what do you put in jams and jellies? Well, something to sweeten it. So that kind of brings it up to a palatable level. They're very tart when they're raw. They can be used in pies and syrups and salads. The flowers are in the next picture, but they're very yellow flowers, and they're kind of add a nice color and aroma to wraps and salads and such. The young leaves are available in the spring. The older, mature leaves are very waxy and spiny. Even the spines on the young leaves over here on the lower left are pliable. You can just break those off and pop them in your mouth. They have some oxalic acid, I believe, in them, so they're a little tart on the tart side, but they are very tasty. Good addition to a layered salad as far as just the textures and tastes and the flavors associated with it. But those aren't going to be present year round, because as they mature, they become waxy and hard. They are an evergreen, so to speak, in that they don't lose their leaves in the wintertime. They maintain their leaves year round. So that's a good thing. The berries will kind of fall off or be consumed by other creatures by the time spring rolls around. The blossoms pop out again. So the roots are medicinal instead of edible, but you'll notice that the leaves on the Oregon grape are opposite each other. It's a very important distinction to make, and we'll share some. There's nothing inherently toxic about Oregon grape at all, but you want to make sure you have Oregon grape. Again, it's low growing, has blueberries, yellow flowers, and it can be tall, but it also has blueberries and yellow flowers. So this is a comparison between holly, which is sometimes mistaken for Oregon grape. A holly is a tree. The holly is a three-dimensional leaf. You can see how it's twisted, both in the upward plane and lower plane. The Oregon grape is in a single plane. The leaves are opposite each other on a kind of like a fern-like frond, as opposed to a branch like a holly. The holly has white blossoms and red berries, whereas the blossom of the Oregon grape is yellow, just very bright yellow, and the berries are blue. So very, very opposite one another. So they're not something that can be mistaken easily. The holly leaves are always just very, very spiky and just they'll stick into your skin or into your shoes or whatever. They're pretty stout. But the Oregon grape, while spiky, when they're mature, aren't going to be nearly as egregious as the holly leaf. So some additional nutritional benefits include the fact that they are an excellent source of vitamin A and vitamin C, also pectins and soluble fiber. So the soluble fiber found in the Oregon grape is beneficial for moderating blood sugar as well as cholesterol lowering. Also has immune system booster effects in the berries, and the berries are best used in smoothies because you have other sweet things that can overcome the tartness. They have an antioxidant boost that will be provided in the smoothie from the berries. So the berries are very rich in antioxidants. So the leaves, the berries, and the flowers are the primary edible component. And it's present year-round, so it's easy to find. Some things die back and you don't see them throughout the year. But as far as the medicinal value of the roots, they are going to be present year-round. You can see an example of the roots here that an individual has dug up here and then shredded. They contain a component called berberine, and this is the primary active component that has lots of beneficial effects in the root from a medicinal standpoint. It's an alkaloid, and it has antifungal, antiviral, antibacterial properties associated with it. And in that, some other properties that it has is aiding blood sugar regulation. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And metabolism regulation and control helps in lowering cholesterol. It also has neuroprotective effects and anti-parasitic, anti-cancer, and has ACE inhibitor effects, as well as, again, benefiting type 2 diabetes and blood sugar control. So the root is the primary component of the plant that's used on a medicinal basis. So not as a food, but it can be taken internally and externally as a medicinal source of remedial action. So it can stimulate a variety of different organs, the liver, the blood, it's a blood cleanser, the spleen, and the GI tract, gallbladder rather, it's kind of hidden here, the gallbladder. So it basically stimulates liver and bile secretion. So the bile duct and the gallbladder are intimately associated with one another. The bile is made up of essentially cholesterol derivatives, which people who have a high fat diet will also inherently typically have a high cholesterol diet as well, which is what makes up the primary makeup of bile. And when bile is secreted, when the body senses fats entering the system, it functions as a fat emulsifier. It basically helps to break it down and make it more accessible to the body. People on a low-fat diet typically have low cholesterol and low bile secretion. People who have gallstones, which is can block and be painful in the gallbladder, they can be activated and riled up with a high-fat diet. A low-fat diet tends to calm them down. So the best advice that Dr. McDougall has shared is really you can leave those gallstones in for the most part because they can act as a barometer and say, hey, I'm getting too much fat, need to back off, go with the low-fat, stick with the low-fat, low oil, no oil, kinds of a dietary perspective. So it can kind of be your own personal radar machine for when you're getting too much excessive fat into your body. So the gallbladder functions really well in the body to help emulsify fats. So it can stimulate liver and bile secretion. It also aids in non-alcoholic induced fatty liver disease. This is based on, so fatty liver disease is a disease typically in conjunction with alcoholics along with cirrhosis, but it's become much more common in the general population, tied highly to the use of high fructose corn syrup. Basically, it's metabolized the same way that alcohol is, and it contributes to that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and also aids in type 2 diabetes. So it helps clean the blood, the gallbladder and the spleen, and also other symptoms associated with weaknesses in the spleen, liver, and gallbladder, i.e. headaches or other gastrointestinal issues, and accumulated toxins help to get them moving on out of the body. Because your liver is the primary detox organ of your body, it's the organ in the body that has a capacity to regenerate. If someone has a diseased liver, they can take most of it out, and if there's still a good section of it, that will regenerate. It's also dynamic in that it becomes very efficient at detoxifying various pharmaceuticals and other drugs. That's why you have drug tolerance. The liver becomes more effective at cleansing it, and then it requires a larger dose to have the metabolic effect that you might be looking for. So that's also illicit drugs as well, hence the need for higher doses, which can become even more dangerous as they're used. So antibacterial benefits as well. So urinary tract infections, staph, and strep. The root tea is very beneficial for infections, both internally and externally, including MRSA, which is moxicillin or methicillin resistant staph infection. So it's a antibiotic resistant staph. Various respiratory lung infections and bladder infections also respond well to the tea from the root of the Oregon grape. Has antiviral effects. The berberine, again, functions as an antiviral. Basically, it inhibits a neuroaminidase, which is an enzyme. Anything that ends with ASE is an enzyme, and they function in catalytic roles and moving reactions forward in the body. And essentially, this enzyme is the one that promotes viral replication. It cuts off sugar change on the exterior of the cell that is hosting the virus and enables it to spread to neighboring cells. What berberine does as an antiviral is it inhibits that action, that ability of the virus to clip off those glycosides, the sugar chains on the exterior of the cell, and prevents viral spreading in the body. So it basically inhibits the replication of the virus in the body. That's good news, especially in today's environment when we have a heightened awareness for various types of viruses. It also inhibits the inflammatory response that viral infections initiate. So we hear about the cytokine storm and those types of things in situations where viruses have a hold on the body. Essentially, there's two different types of cytokines, and they're both implicated in the immune response. Some actually decrease inflammation, others increase inflammation. And the effect of the berberine and the Oregon grape is to decrease the amount of the inflammatory promoting cytokines, which is what happens in viruses, and they're so dangerous. So it also has functions against herpes virus. Those are the ones that are responsible for cold sores and other types of herpes. Zika, HIV, which is responsible for AIDS, influenza A, which is otherwise known as H1N1, and the swine flu and other types of flu. So it has excellent antiviral effects from the root tea. So a good thing to just kind of stick in your back pocket and watch out for and look for the presence of Oregon grape in your yard or where you spend time outdoors. It's also helpful in gastritis and diarrhea and dysentery. The Oregon grape root tea, again, is beneficial for that. It basically aids the microbiome, the intestinal flora of the body, to balance itself. There's soluble fiber there that's helpful in creating a positive habitat for them to replicate appropriately. So that tea, that Oregon grape root tea, is made from a ½ ounce of the root that's been dried and crushed into 1 quart of water. So combine the two of those into a pot with a tight lid, and then bring that to a boil. Then slow it down to simmer for 10 to 15 minutes. Strain it, and then you can use it to drink. You can drink it in, a quart at a time, or you can drink it in lesser amounts as needed. It's also used both internally and externally you can use that tea as a wash, particularly for skin conditions. So wound care, because it has an antiviral or antibacterial and antifungal effects, can help with things like gangrene or anything else like that. Antifungal acne is an infection of the pores of the body, the hair follicles. Psoriasis, psoriasis is basically a digestive disorder that manifests itself in the skin. A lot of different rashes and things like that, eczema as well, can actually be linked to GI issues. And when the GI issues are settled down, the skin issues go away. Because the skin is the largest excretory organ of the body, and it has direct effects from the interior. If the skin is irritated, likely the GI is irritated as well. So eczema and psoriasis, similar types of things, but slightly different bases. And then herpes in addition, so that'd be like cold sores and things like that. Also has anti-parasitic effects. So Oregon grape root, again, you can use it internally and externally, has antimicrobial effects. One thing that I found really neat about it was the fact that it helps to take away giardia. So giardia, also known as beaver fever, is a very pernicious waterborne disease from a cyst. So you can see some pictures of the cysts over here. What caught my attention of that was they look like little smiley faces, except they're not even smiley faces. They're more like kind of stoic faces. But that's a cyst. It's a waterborne cyst. And the thing about that is they're most found in tumbling water or water that's moving. If you need to get water that's fresh, you don't have a filter, the best place to get it is in the center of standing water. So like a lake, in the center of the lake. If you're in turbid water or water that's tumbling like a cold mountain stream, it's going to be more present in that type of water than in still water where the cyst will settle out. Another way to do that possibly would be to grab water and let it stand for a period of time, maybe overnight or a couple days to be sure, and then decant the water off the top so that you don't have the cysts in the bottom. So also other types of protozoans and worms can be effectively rid of the body using the tea of the Oregon grape root. The blood sugar lowering effects. So this is very beneficial for type 2 diabetics. The grape root, Oregon grape root, berberine, has a similar function to metformin, which is a glucophage. I think glucophage is actually a brand name, but essentially it's a sugar eater. Phagy is to eat, gluco is sugar. So it basically aids the insulin function of the body. And that metformin also functions in an anti-cancer kind of effect. Sugar aids cancer proliferation. So one of the key things that people who are attempting to turn cancer the opposite direction from proliferation and metastasis is to go away from all sources of refined sugar. And even in the critical stages, in the first stages, even excess of non-refined sugars just coming from sweet fruit, for example, just minimizing the amount of sweet fruit. After it's gotten turned around and moved in the right direction, you may be able to add some of those things after a while. But essentially it inhibits tumor growth essentially by starving it. So it activates AMPK and AMP, which are activated protein kinases, which function in regulating cell growth. Because that's one of the things that cancer has a problem with, and that's unregulated cell growth and the lack of programmed cell death known as apoptosis. That doesn't die, they don't die when they're supposed to, because all cells have a lifespan and they're constantly being replaced with new cells with their machinery intact and ready to go, except for cancer cells that just continue to proliferate. So cardiovascular disease, CD, or heart disease, functions, the grapefruit extract can function as an ACE inhibitor, ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, and that functions in the kidney and increases blood flow through vasodilatory effects. It basically widens the blood vessels. So here's a picture of the roots that have been shredded so that you can pick those roots out in the fall or even throughout the year. And you uproot the plant and then maybe keep the crown, and you can replant that and it'll sprout back into a new plant. That way you can perpetuate the harvest and not be totally killing the plant, allow it to regrow and produce again for future seasons. And then the Oregon grapes there again, known as nature's warheads because they're just very bitter. So they could be maybe in a fruit salad or something like that, or a fruit smoothie, but add kind of a flavorful dimension to it. So that is Oregon grape. The next thing I want to look at is another edible plant called purslane. So purslane, I remember this as a kid in our garden. It's a succulent, has kind of a thick pad. Sometimes it has red stems. You can see the lower left picture there, kind of in a crack in the sidewalk there. It has red stems, and they can also just be green. You can see the flowers there, little yellow flowers. Those leaves can be kind of bitter when they're mature, but when they're young, very succulent, salty, sour flavor. You can eat the leaves, stems, and the flowers. You can eat them cooked or raw or pickled. It kind of gets a slimy texture when it's cooked because of the mucilaginous nature, the effect of it being a succulent. There we go. But actually it has a lot of pectin in it. So that pectin is actually beneficial for the body too. And you may even be able to, and I didn't mention this, but you may be able to use it in canning effects or jelly making as a fruit pectin. It doesn't reduce in volume when it's cooked. So unlike spinach and other greens, when you cook them, you can put a whole big pan full, and then when you cook them, they just wilt down to nothing. This maintains its structure and integrity with heat. So you can feed a nice volume of people. If you have a nice patch of purslane, you can eat this in an unlimited fashion. It's very, very nutritious, as you can see in the middle there. But you can eat it without having to worry about any kind of toxicities from it. So it's a very healthful plant to have. In fact, I was pretty excited today. I bumped into some in the garden over at where I was working at the church today. So the seeds can actually be collected and made into a flour. You can see the seeds on the right. They remind me of chia seeds, and I think they're probably about the same size. They also have high omega-3s like chia does. They don't harvest these on a commercial basis typically, although you can buy purslane seeds. The plant itself is high in beta carotene, vitamin A and vitamin C, folate, so folic acid for people who may be of childbearing status, iron, phosphorus. If you have iron poor blood, anemia, grab some purslane. Calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, riboflavin, and again, high in omega-3s. The leaves can actually be stored through the winter for a period of time if picked in the fall and refrigerated. So they do have a bit of a shelf life associated with them. It doesn't grow year round. It does tend to die back in the wintertime. So purslane can be fairly abundant. There was one place near where we live where I went to pick blueberries, and there was purslane it was just a ubiquitous weed around the base of the organic blueberries. It's very interesting. So it kind of grows in pockets. It doesn't grow everywhere, but most weeds kind of make their way around one time or another. So some medicinal benefits of purslane. The purslane seeds can be used to decrease the duration and volume of uterine bleeding. So to take them internally. Also beneficial for lung conditions like asthma and other bronchial issues. So individuals have been using purslane extract. They have overall improved pulmonary function. So their respiratory capacity is maintained and benefited. So aids shortness of breath, basically bronchodilates, which is a problem with asthma because that's bronchoconstriction is a hallmark of asthma. Some people have asthma that's induced by various histamine effects. Others have cold-induced asthma or exercise-induced asthma, but the purslane can help to bronchodilate. So if you have an asthma attack, another thing that you can do is add mullein to the purslane. I should have had a picture of mullein here too, but it's nature's toilet paper essentially. It's a very fuzzy leaf that has a tall flower spike that is yellow. The flowers are yellow. Not to be confused with foxglove. Foxglove also has fuzzy leaves, but the flowers are distinctively different. So some Iranian research shows the bronchodilatory effects of the mix of mullein and purslane. Take 3 droppers of purslane tincture and 1.5 dropper of mullein tincture to a 1/4 cup of water. So your dropper is not going to fill up completely necessarily, but it's the ratio that's more important than the actual volume. And then you can drink the mix, either the whole mix, whole 1/4 cup at a time, or in divided parts. So it's using mullein along with purslane for bronchial dilatory effects for asthma situations. So the tincture is going to be made, again, over a period of time using either glycerin extract or an alcohol extract. Typically, I like to use a glycerin extract as opposed to alcohol, just to avoid the alcohol basis to it. So you want to have those things on hand. So blood sugar control. The purslane seeds aid in insulin level stability, helps manage diabetes better, especially when used over a long period of time daily. So it reduces triglycerides in the body as well. Also beneficial in antifungal effects. So athlete's foot, jock itch, ringworm, those types of things. You can put the extract again of the purslane on the area that's affected for several times over the course of the day until the symptoms go away. The cholesterol lowering effects basically due to the high pectin content. So if you take a 1 teaspoon purslane tincture daily or 2 teaspoons of the fresh purslane juice daily, that will aid in lowering the cholesterol. So the pectin is the primary agent in aiding the cholesterol reduction, largely as a mechanism of transport out of the body binds it up. So cancer, gastric carcinoma or colon adenoma, the seeds and leaves from the purslane are beneficial for these two different types of cancers. And the two things that are very beneficial are the omega-3 and the gamma-linolenic acid, functioning in powerful antioxidant effects. So again, purslane is a very edible plant. It doesn't lose its volume when you're eating it. It has medicinal qualities too. From its edibility standpoint, you can eat it like any other food, just in volume. You can eat it in volume. So it has very nutrient rich and could be beneficial in times of nutritional deficit, if you know where to look for purslane. So here's some pictures again of the purslane plant. So it can stand up fairly high. I would say maybe 6 inches is about as tall as it gets, but it can be creeping on the ground. Sometimes it has yellow stems, sometimes red stems, but it's going to be succulent. It's going to be padded. And you can see in the lower left, the seed capsule, the little black things inside of the seeds that someone has opened up there. And then the seeds are very tiny. So along the order of chia seeds.